you very much, firstly, for the opportunity to speak this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased to be here. I'm just going to take this down a peg in terms of maybe speed and 21st century immersion. And I'm thinking back, I don't think there's anybody in this room who, maybe I'm wrong, who was in university when MOOCs were started. You know, was anybody here actually in university at that stage? No. In fact, I'm not even sure that I was in school when I think I'd finished school by the time we'd all finished school. So I suppose we need to look at the speed with which all of this is happening and the way in which we can extract the best out of the technologies that we're seeing. I got my first mobile phone in 1995. That's only 20 years ago, but I can't imagine what life was like without it. First search engines, Google was only made available on the market in 1998. Yahoo was a little earlier, but less successful. And things like blogs only started in earnest in the early 2000s, which is 5 minutes ago in normal people's terms. Next weekend I'm going to London. I booked my Eurostar online. I've booked my Airbnb online. My Royal Opera House tickets I booked on the basis of recommendations that I've read online. I haven't actually had an interaction with a person about this visit at all. Booked restaurants online. Now that, for me, is not diminishing my experience. I'm sure I'm going to have a fantastic weekend. It's enhancing my experience. And it's a roundabout way of saying, I suppose, that I think in terms of education, digital education can be an enormous enhancement to what has been available for decades and centuries in a very conventional way. And MOOCs are very much part of that. And they can be an enormous enhancement, and I do say can. I thought it was interesting when Hans asked the room how many people had done a MOOC or completed a MOOC. I would add an extra question. How many people have enrolled and given up on MOOCs, as well as, personally, I've enrolled in about 6. I gave up on 3 of them because they were worse than useless. They were absolutely dreadful. I gave up on 1 because I just didn't have the time, and I completed 2, which were fantastic. So for me, it's anecdotal, I know, but I think that's probably a reasonable reflection of a lot of people's experiences of MOOCs to date. I think digital education, it can improve the efficiency of education. I think the last speaker is absolutely right. You can reach out to tens and hundreds of thousands of people who would never have the opportunity before. It increases connectedness for people, and it offers enjoyment and stimulation. But a bad website, if I had gone onto a hotel or an Airbnb website last weekend and seen something that didn't work, I wouldn't have booked it. Equally, if a MOOC is not good, people won't use it. And it's a matter of, I think, for us as policymakers, helping to ensure that the quality is there. Quality is really key. We published this year the Education and Training Monitor, and in terms of digital education, I think one of the concerns that comes across most strongly is the quality issue. Taking it back again a little from MOOCs, because it's only part of the digital experience for me. I think that teachers are the key thing in the whole educational experience in the digital space, just as much as they are in the classroom. And it starts in the classroom. If we want kids to get to a stage where they're comfortable with learning through the digital experience and through MOOCs, they need to be equipped with the expertise to do that. Only about 20 to 25% of teachers in the classroom are actually comfortable with the equipment that they have, if they've got the equipment. Only 20 to 25% are so-called digitally confident and competent. And the resources that kids at primary and secondary school have vary enormously. In a national study that was part of that monitor, the student to computer ratio in Croatia is 26 to 1, whereas in Denmark it's 4 to 1. So that's a pretty remarkable difference across the EU. In terms of schools that have and use modelling software, so not just putting up videos and so on, it's 90% in the Netherlands. It's about 57, 58% in Germany, but it's only 15% in the Czech Republic. So I think we've got a lot of matters of access to sort out. We've got matters of equality to sort out. And I would sort of break down a little of what what the last speaker was talking about in terms of digital skills and the 800 jobs that are open and so on. MOOCs don't necessarily transmit digital skills. They just mean that you can switch on a computer. And no more than that. I mean, some of the best courses available on MOOCs are in ancient history and cinematography. They're nothing at all to do with digital skills. So I'm, in many ways, much more interested in the blended learning model, where MOOCs are used as part of the learning experience, but not necessarily the whole thing. I'd just like to share with you the results of a study that hasn't yet been published. It's been done by the Joint Research Centre, the IPTS, down in Seville, and it'll be published either this month or next, certainly before the end of the year. It's a relatively small study. It used data from 5 EU member states. A total of 178 universities responded to a questionnaire, which of course were the ones who were interested in the area. The ones who are less interested probably didn't reply, so they've tried to balance the results out, taking that into account. But they looked at the use of ICT-based learning in universities, and they found that 85% of universities that replied use online material, so most of them. About 61% use online collaborative tools, which is also not bad. In or around 43%, so less than half, but still a substantial number, are using the flipped classroom method, or at least in some ways. 28% have programs that are fully online, and only 22% are using learning analytics. And I think it's really interesting to start doing a deep dive into what you can learn from the analytics that come back from the students' use. What is highly valued, according to those surveyed, is the blended learning model. So not the pure online model or the pure classroom model, but the blended learning model is very highly valued, especially in terms of the characteristics that people identified as very important. Was the area of active learning, the communication between teachers and students. Paradoxically, one of the criticisms in the early days of online learning was, students will never see their teachers, they'll have no communication with them. It makes it much more distant. In fact, the opposite seems to be the students' experience. They have a much more direct, short email contact, and they feel that they've got a better collaboration and communication experience with their teachers, and indeed between each other as well. Because don't forget, most of these people are digital natives when they're at university stage, so they're not maybe as inhibited as I might be in terms of just shooting off an email about something. They also found that they reckoned that it was a better use of both the students' time and the teachers' time. But one thing that they didn't think was that it was a way of cutting costs, either for the students or for the universities involved. They felt that it was probably cost neutral on balance. But again, the use of the open education models, and this study is on open education and MOOCs being part of that. Much more positive feedback from countries like the UK, where open education is being used much more extensively than it is, for example, in Germany, where it's relatively low numbers, about 22%. And the other 3 member states are Spain, Poland and France, which fall somewhere in the middle. In terms of MOOCs being done at the universities surveyed, the results were interesting. They were slightly lower than other surveys that have been done, but the JRC reckoned that that's because they have tried to take out the positive bias in their figures, which results from only the people who are interested in the area responding. So they reckon that about 41% of all higher education institutes either have or are in the process of setting up MOOCs. 22% are up and running already, and about 19% have it in the planning. One thing that concerns me and my colleagues in the Commission is and I'll come back to the issue of quality, but also recognition and a reference framework for recognition. Only about 25% of the MOOCs that were covered in this study are connected to the ECTS. About 9% only are connected in any way to a national qualifications framework, and 65% aren't connected to anything at all. Now, you may argue, and you may be right in saying that that's not a problem. A lot of people do MOOCs purely for the pleasure and the interest of doing it. But if you're going to try to make it something that you put on your CV that lends credibility to your qualifications, then there has to be some way of measuring the quality. And I'll just finish with a couple of thoughts, and I've probably gone over the 5 minutes, which everybody else has been very strict about.
No one interrupted you.
Not yet. Couple of thoughts. What about MOOCs for schools? I mean, we talk about higher education and lifelong learning, but the whole idea of flipped learning, I think, is really interesting, and I think it's something that can be used at a pre-university stage just as well. I'd go back to the point about teachers. I think if we're going to expect young people to really use digital education to its maximum potential, they need to be able to do more than play on their Xbox. And, you know, we can rely on the grassroots stuff, the coder dojos, which are doing fantastic work, and the need for children to be able to code is indisputable. But I think we need to invest more in teachers and teacher training and in continuing professional development for teachers, because this is moving so fast. And finally, I just want to mention one study that I've seen on Delft TU, which is really interesting. A MOOC that they ran recently on solar energy, photovoltaics, which they used. I think they ran it as an open MOOC that anybody could sign up for, but they also used it as a flipped learning tool within the university itself. But the outcome was interesting. The guy who was running the course, whose name escapes me right now, said that using this methodology of combining the MOOC with classroom teaching, he could cover 30% more coursework. So it was a much more efficient use of his time and the students' time. But also the pass rate on his course went up from the period 2010 to 2013, 71% of people taking the course passed. And that went up to 89% in 2014 by using this flipped learning MOOC combination. The average grades went up. And in a survey of the students using the system, 69% of them said that they preferred this to the traditional classroom model, and only 13% said that they would prefer to have just the straight classroom model that I suspect all of us were probably put through in our youth. So I'll leave that thought with you, and I'll be very interested to hear your experiences and thoughts later on. Thank you.